Welcome to MavenCast, deep dive conversations with industry experts designed to move your business, technology, and thinking forward.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Ensono's MavenCast. I'm your host, Stephen Perva, an expert mainframe innovation engineer at Ensono, four-time IBM champion, and founder of the System Z Enthusiast Discord. I'm a self-described enterprise computing troublemaker since 2010. Most importantly, I'll be your host once again for this episode in our three-part series exploring some hot topics in the mainframe space with some of my fellow Ensono 2025 IBM champions. Now, I've been plugged into the mainframe ecosystem my entire professional career, not just as a technologist, but as an advocate for what's next, from cultural shifts to cutting-edge technology. My work has taken me to stages around the world to speak on modernization, integration, and cross-generational collaboration. Earlier this year, I dug into the truths and the myths of what mainframe modernization really means in an article for the Maven Report. But as valuable as I truly believe advocacy is, real innovation doesn't happen in a speech or on a page. Real innovation happens down in the trenches, driven by technologists that are willing to roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, and challenge the status quo when they feel it's the right move for their business or their clients. And I am lucky enough to have one of those boots-on-the-ground mainframers here with me today, principal technologist, IBM champion, and unfortunately for him, a haphazard collaborator of mine, Mr. Paul Buchanan. Paul, welcome to MavenCast. Did I get all your credentials right?
I think you left out Ensono President Club winner as well.
All right. Yes, a fellow purple jacket wearer. Yes. Absolutely. I apologize for that. So you and I have been chomping at the bit to have this conversation for quite some time now, and I really can't wait for us to get right into it. But before we do that, can I get the shorthand version of who Paul Buchanan is? What do? Why somebody who cares about the mainframe needs to be paying attention to every word you say, and what does being an IBM champion mean to you, Paul?
The short version, right, is I started in the 90s, late 90s in the mainframe space as a tape operator, right? Probably one of the last generations to do that. Not everybody's doing that. Most people are coming right out of school. Scrapped my way up through tape operations in a single shop, moved into the managed service provider space in operations, moved into automation. And since 2008, I've spent a lot of time on event management, ensuring the systems are up, they're stable for our clients, that we reduce those human errors, that we reduce those MIs, those P2s, those critical impacts to the system. Client systems first. Employee satisfaction is high up there as well. If we keep our employees satisfied, our clients are better satisfied, right? We can do a better job and a stronger job supporting their systems.
Absolutely. So that ethic and that genesis story is what kind of got you into the IBM Champion ecosystem. What does that feel like? You're new to the program, right? Like, what's that feel like for you?
I am new to the program. I've been looking to do this for quite some time, but I'm not new to the habits of the program, of speaking at conferences, of writing papers, of speaking up, of being a voice for our industry, for our coworkers, for our clients. Sometimes it's telling vendors what they do incorrectly with their software, where those gaps are. Sometimes it's battling leadership and saying we need to strengthen these areas for our clients' sake. And all around, it's great to have a conversation about the industry and how we as a community can take all that diversity and make it stronger.
So it sounds like you're kind of living and breathing this relentless ally ethos, right? Not only in the way that you advocate for clients, but in the way that you advocate for the overall industry at large. And I think that is one of the biggest components of being an IBM champion. And you're absolutely right. Something that a lot of people were surprised about, and even myself was surprised about, was knowing your history with how you've been a critical speaker. You've been at almost every share that I've been at, speaking at numerous sessions, right? And when you finally came to the table as the IBM champion, I was like, well, it's about darn time, right? It's super amazing to have that. So I am grateful to have you in the hot seat here. And I really want to just jump right into this as quick as we can. So let's start with the topic that we're seeing out there today. We have tons of organizations that say they're modernizing their mainframe, but you and I can be honest with one another. Sometimes that's all talk and no action. We have a huge portfolio as mainframe industry enthusiasts of modernizations options out there. And it's really simple to pick a few of those aspirational names or topics and say that that's what you're targeting. But like we said earlier, doing that actual work is what separates the dreamers from the doers. So what do you think is keeping companies back from making that meaningful progress on their modernization dreams? And what shift do leaders need to make to move from maintenance to momentum in their quote-unquote modernization journey?
You and I have talked about this so much. I hate the word modernization when it comes to mainframe. We go back to the space program, right? HASP, common mainframe message, right? Go look at the history there. Go look at IBM, helping the moon launches. Go all the way back. The mainframe has always been at the leader of the pack. The problem is you have people making business decisions when it should be a technological decision. And sometimes it's catching up, and sometimes it's those buzzwords, right? We need to modernize our applications. Your applications run great. Could they be enhanced? Yes. Could they be improved? Absolutely. But sometimes people get caught up in the buzzword and focus on the wrong areas. So doing a deep dive through your whole entire system to understand what really needs to be modernized. We had a client a couple years ago who talked about leaving the mainframe space. They wanted to leave because they weren't getting the performance they sought out. We asked them, stick around, allow us to upgrade the system. Tuesday morning, when the batch cycle was supposed to be running at 7 a.m., they panicked. They panicked because the batch was not running. And that's because it had finished a couple hours before, because the system had gotten so much better. The performance had enhanced so much. And they're like, why did we even consider this? And a lot of times people get caught up in these catchphrases, these buzzwords, and it absolutely drives me nuts. Is the hype is what does some of the most damage. Working with people like you and myself, we can take that hype and turn it into reality, turn it into an improvement for our clients, and we do that through multiple areas, AI, other areas as well. So
it sounds like to you that big component of optimization is really a facet of what you would consider these quote unquote, and that's why I use quote unquote, right, when around the word modernization, right? That's a facet to that modernization journey for you. So is there anything in the rest of the ideas that people kind of swirl around when you think of modernization? You named off a few of those buzzwords. I've always said that, like, when in Rome, do as Romans do. And when I think of this term modernization, I always think of when hanging out with marketers, do what marketing does, right? So sometimes we have to use that word modernization. It's almost like a necessary evil when we talk to one another. But you and I definitely get that friction. Yeah, modernization, it feels painful when we have AI inference on chip. We have all of this amazing technology at our disposal, soon to be quantum. Insert whatever buzzword you want to talk about next. Is there any of those buzzwords that you're starting to see like real tangible benefits to that is kind of outside this purview of optimization?
AI is one of those areas. I've talked to IBM about this recently, and 2020 was a big impact to the industry. We all went fully remote in a split second. The problem is none of the training efforts throughout the industry was meant to handle a remote environment. How do we change our operations who used to live in a pod in the same room, who could look over their shoulders, and now who do they go to? Who are the experts? Who are the people not having a bad day? Sometimes you reach out to someone in Teams and say, I need an answer, but they're busy, or they just don't respond for whatever reason. And that delays our response to people. New hires, who are the experts? Who do I turn to? Who can I partner with? And so AI is definitely an area that is benefiting us so that we can benefit back to our clients.
Yeah. So you're basically saying that AI is a great referential tool. And I think that in my previous conversation with Caroline Whitaker, we had that same conclusion, right? It's nice to use AI as a referential tool, and we have high aspirations for what it will mean for that reference to grow into areas of how can I learn about the systems I am interacting with? How can I kind of short circuit that path to problem determination as well? But I'd like to switch gears a bit to a phrase that you and I might consider the bastion of the mainframe, right? And that's, we hear it all the time, again, one of those perhaps marketing phrases, and that's this notion of the hybrid cloud.
Mhm.
A lot of people see hybrid cloud as a bridge we'll use to get from where we are to where we want to be, from the quote unquote old to the quote unquote new. And I'd love to get your take on the hybrid cloud. Is hybrid really going to help organizations move the needle, or is it just going to enable them to play it safe with this modernization journey that we all think we're on?
Hybrid cloud is a necessity, right? When the word cloud first came out, the first thing I thought of was DASI storage on the mainframe, right? We've been doing that for years. That is cloud storage in its purest of forms, and absolutely love the concept. The thing is you cannot sacrifice security for ease of access, and that's something people forget to consider. Is my hybrid cloud actually secure? It does it fall in line with PCI compliance, GDPR? There's all kinds of different security audits. State and legislative clients have higher standards as well. So it's to be considered. Is it harmful? Is it helpful? Is it secure? Is it a distraction from what your real issue is? Is it just a buzzword to say we're doing something, but we're not really doing anything beneficial? We're not, everybody wants to save the dollars. If we can bring the dollars down efficiently through better practices, let's do so.
So I'm going to try to hit you with a curveball here, because something that you just said kind of struck out a new question for me, and this isn't something that you're likely to anticipate here. It's just the idea that, would you see this component, the hybrid cloud, as a component of a quote unquote modernization journey, or would you see that as a whole separate thing?
You can lump it into modernization. Whether you have a hybrid cloud or not does not say you're modern or not modern. It's a tool. People like to use the word observability, right? Observability just means you're observing something. It's a flashy new word, right? Do you have DASD? Do you have shared DASD? Does your CICS integrate with your DASD? It's storage, and it's just newer storage.
I often see that like people in the industry sometimes confuse this notion of the hybrid cloud with something that you and I are probably well familiar with by now, and that's simple integration, right? Like, how do I integrate my mainframe ecosystem with my non-mainframe ecosystem in a way that doesn't feel completely nascent, something I created just out of the thin of my head, right? And put it on paper, and when I vanish from whatever place I am, someone inherits that and has to rebuild the entire empire from scratch. Is that something that you experience out there as well, or you got a different take on that?
Absolutely. It's APIs, how you integrate CICS, IMS, MQs, DB2s, right? I'm tossing out all these buzzwords for onlines for mainframe. Whatever that is, super regions, right? IDMS, we've seen it, we've dealt with it. It's that code, it's that underlying structure of the code that's really critical. Could we do some modernization there? Absolutely. Go from COBOL up to Python, and people are seeing some clock time differences there. So benefits are there.
So we're playing a little bit of the buzzword lottery here today, and it feels great. Anytime you're talking to a mainframer, right? You're just basically spinning the wheel, grabbing a buzzword, and talking forever. So I'm going to throw a few buzzwords at you, kind of rapid fire style, right? We got AI,
Right.
automation, open source. Some of those you could consider as game changers, and some of those you're like, okay. But what do you see of the three buzzwords that I just threw at you? Again, AI, automation, open source. What do you see from those as actually delivering any sort of return on investment? And what's out there just making headlines?
Automation has been the workforce, and that's where I've spent a bulk of my career is automation.
Mm-hmm.
Automation on the system, and now I have the opportunity to work with Ansible, which is a parallel effort to the mainframe and taking the automation off the system into our ticketing systems. It makes a huge difference. It reduces the human errors. It reduces the redundancy, the manual tasks, everything you're doing. And people get panicked. Oh, you're going to start laying off people because you're automating all this. No. There's so much more we can do. There's health checks that we could run that are more predictive, and we can start to enhance that platform for our clients and make them so much stronger without eliminating workforce, but also improving the bottom dollar, right? Everybody wants that cost efficiency, and we can improve that. So we're seeing a lot of that be a stronghold. It will continue to be a stronghold for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. AI is here to stay. AI as a training model. And you and I know when we talk to someone who doesn't understand the mainframe, there's all these message IDs, there's these error codes, append codes, there's all the lingo. You need a decoder ring to talk to a mainframe person because, IPL, what's that? Well, rebooting the system, but it's, initial program load compared to initial machine load. So there's all these acronyms. And, I probably have thousands up in my head at this point, for doing this for so long. But for a new person, it's scary. What does a HASP 50 say compared to an IEF 404I? What's an IBR 14, right?
Right, exactly.
What's JCL? And so with the AI being able to take that mystery out of the training and make things a lot more uniform. And that's where automation comes into play as well. If we can automate some of these redundancies, if our staff does not have to worry about which data set their rules for automation live in and just have to worry about getting those automation tools out. And that's where we start to have the CI/CD pipeline. That's where the benefits come in, is now you're not focused on what I call the stupid stuff, the stuff I don't want to deal with. I'm a lazy person. I don't like to do this nonsensical garbage. I want to be in there coding. I want to be in there architecting. Unfortunately, I'm able to do that. Open source is not new. It's been around. You go back, you talk to some of these, and I'm one of these old people now. There's bulletin board systems from back in the day. There's MUDs and all these different things that were coded because people wanted to share the internet with others in some sort of way. Even TSO, the primary access for mainframes is time sharing option. And so the mainframe's always been about sharing with others. And that open source allows for broader eyes. As a managed service provider, we have a unique insight. We sit between vendors and our clients. We know what works better from a practical approach than some of the single shops do, and definitely a lot of times more than the vendors do. And there are gaps, and we've been fortunate enough to talk to the vendors about that, to partner with vendors like IBM and do that. So
yeah, so we really have that vision of what I would call kind of a holistic approach to a lot of these hot topics, right? What might work in a singular environment that really almost feels like it's cooked up deliberately for that environment may not be kind of a generic what I call a one size fits most solution. So what I'd like to kind of try to rewind a little bit the conversation to something that you touched on when we first started talking about this, and you said modernization, right? We've been putting people on the moon with mainframe computers for quite some time, right? You touched on your career kind of being focused on automation, and you just said that that's a huge driver of a return on investment right now. And I have truly felt this, and I'd like to get your take on this. The big fear around automation, you've said it already once before, is that making people redundant? Is that eliminating people from the equation? I have always told a lot of these top tier mainframe talents that we have at least in our orbit, like across the industry and within the four walls that we call Ensono, I say, if you truly believe that the value that you bring to the table is updating some JCL to change the version qualifier from 5.4 to 5.6, you're selling yourself short. And if there's leaders out there that are thinking about their staff and they're thinking, that's part of what I expect these people to be doing as part of their responsibilities, what would you say would you say that automation has a role to play in making that not the focus of somebody's career, but instead focusing on how do I troubleshoot those MIs that you were talking about? Or how do I swoop in and save the day when something needs a hero that knows everything about the darn system and not just simple editing of values in a configuration file?
I almost label it as a toxic trait, of like a toxic employee. And at times it really is you see this sometimes in smaller shops where you've got one person who's wearing multiple hats and they say, we shouldn't do this because whatever, And it comes down to fear for their job, fear for control, and fear of just not understanding. So sometimes that happens throughout the industry, and we see it a lot, unfortunately. So I think automation is good at removing that, but I think it's also the policies and procedures and the industry trends and what's industry best practices. And that's where you and I sit in this unique space of being able to say what those industry best practices should be, because we've taken the egotistical sense out of it. And we've said this, a lot of times I don't have skin in the game. I want what's best for the clients and I want what's best for our employees. I I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I have a job. But unfortunately there are people out there that, don't think that way, that want to hang on and just stick in that little box. And I think that's a big detriment to our space.
Absolutely right. It's about valuing the people for what all they bring to the table, not just the singular function that they bring to the table. So I've kind of put you in the spotlight and tortured you a bit and put you out there asking you controversial opinions. So let me pick your brain for one last opinion that will hopefully not throw you under the bus. So I'd like for you to break out your crystal ball, project yourself 5 years into the future. What's one shift in this conversation about mainframe modernization that's going to catch us all off guard? Is there something out there that you think people aren't paying attention to right now, but definitely should be?
I think it's the fact that it's happening. And that this is not going to go away. I've heard of a lot of these, fads in the industry, whether it's the no-touch IPLs, which we're actually pursuing in Ensono because it's actually viable with the tools we have in place. But I think a lot of times people think, oh, we're just going to not worry about that and it's just going to go away. When in fact, there's business and technological needs around modernization. It's going to happen. I think what's going to really take the cake is we have this younger staff, and I say that because I'm in my 50s, but we have this younger staff who are in the first 15 years of their career, who understand what's been in place, what's new, and they're able to start to translate between the two generations, because I see it with people older than myself. A lot of them don't want to understand what's new and they push back that resistance. So I think it's a people shift more than a technological shift that's going to happen over the next 5 years. So I think that mindset is going to come out stronger than ever.
Yeah, I love that, Paul, and I think that that's a huge thing that I'm just going to repeat it to put a big underline underneath that. It is happening right now. We constantly talk about mainframe modernization as this place to be, this thing that we're trying to achieve. And it's actively going on, whether you like it or not. It's happening within the industry. It's happening within your organizations, most likely. And the people that are doing this actual work are experiencing it in real time. And I can tell you right now that I am getting that scary blinking red light that's telling me that you and I are out of time, and I know that you and I could carry on for hours and hours. And this has been a tremendous conversation. And Paul, it's always a pleasure to pick your brain whenever I can. So thank you so much for joining us on Mavencast. But before I cut you loose, if anybody out there is looking to get better insight into the world of Paul Buchanan, where can they follow you?
They can follow me on LinkedIn. And if they're an Ensono client, I am a technical fellow, and part of my job is interacting with clients. So that request can be made through your SDM to have someone like myself speak to you on whatever topic. We have the technical advisors, but as a technical fellow, the understanding is supposed to be so much greater of our, company and our clients' needs. So feel free to reach out.
That's awesome. Yeah, there you heard it here first, folks. You can just get your hotline right into Mr. Paul Buchanan whenever you need to. I do want to say a huge thank you to the listeners out there who are joining us and tuning in to this episode. I truly hope that Paul and I have given you something new to chew on in your modernization journey, and hopefully you'll join me next time for our final episode of this series of No Holds Barred conversations with yet another IBM champion who will share with us their vision of the future of the mainframe and what it means for their organization. As always, if there's a topic you'd love for us to tackle, we would love to hear from you by email, hello@themavenreport.com. And please be sure to check out themavenreport.com for more expert IT insights and advice to drive your digital transformation. Thanks again for joining us on MavenCast.
Thanks for listening to MavenCast. For more Maven content, including articles, interviews, and videos, visit themavenreport.com.